So these are the sleepers that Heath is targeting and their ADP on CBS Sports. So starting with Justin Fields at quarterback, down to Tyler Higbee at tight end, couple running backs, couple wide receivers as well. And we'll start with Justin Fields there, Heath, because we know there's probably about 15 quarterbacks that I think people can look at, and we're factoring in guys like Kirk Cousins and Derek Carr, and depending on how far Trey Lance or Aaron Rodgers, respectively, whether you like one or like the other, fall. Does Fields feel like he belongs in that group, that there should be maybe a 16 quarterback when you look at what his upside could be, especially as a rusher?
I think he belongs right behind Trey Lance, and they're kind of in their own group, because most of those other guys, you feel pretty confident they're going to be top 14 quarterbacks. You're going to be okay if you have to start them. Both Fields and Lance have the potential to be top 5 quarterbacks and have the risk of things going terribly wrong, as it often did for the Bears last year. I do think with his rushing floor, he averaged about 50 yards per game in his final 6 starts last year, that will keep him in the high-end QB2 discussion. I'd love it if they could find a wide receiver in the next week to play next to Darnell Mooney, but even without that, I believe he has top 10 upside. And the thing that I love is he's separated by almost 50 spots in ADP from Trey Lance. So he's the sleeper, Lance is the breakout, but really the difference between them is the ADP.
Yeah, and granted, if you put Justin Fields on the 49ers, we'd be very excited about Justin Fields. So it's not necessarily one is more talented than the other. The situation is certainly better. Dave, is Justin Fields someone you target, or is it just somebody that, okay, if I need a second quarterback with upside, that's somebody I'll look for?
He's not just a second quarterback with upside. He's someone that you take late in your draft. If you're there in round 12 and Justin Fields' name is still on the board, he's someone that can give you good value. You might draft him in round 12, and in 2 weeks, trade him to the person who took Trey Lance and get someone who was taken in round 8 or 9 in return. So I think that's the kind of upside that you look at with Justin Fields. And unlike Trey Lance, there's no one looking over Justin Fields' shoulder in Chicago. So he doesn't have as good of a situation as Trey Lance does. Obviously, he's not throwing to Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk and George Kittle. Clearly, his offensive line's a problem, but that's a two-way street. If the offensive line's bad, that means Fields runs even more because he's scrambling out of the pocket so he doesn't take a crucial hit. I think Fields has some good upside. So if you look at Trey Lance, you say, well, I got to get him around 100th overall, and say you miss on Trey Lance, the next guy up is Justin Fields, and he's worth taking in round 11 in that regard.
All right, let's talk about a couple running backs here, and we'll start with one that this is just near and dear to my heart because I love Nyheim Hines. I love the situation for him. I think it's going to be a fun season to draft him. And just to give you a little peek behind the curtain, so I let Dave give me his sleepers, I let Heath give me his, and I kind of just take the scraps. And when I saw Nyheim Hines, I was like, Heath, why are you taking my guy? But I'm excited to see him on the list.
I can tell you why, because I think last time we did this, he was on your sleepers list, and they showed the little comparison thing, and I was higher on him. And I said, well, he should be my sleeper then. I've got him ranked higher. No, I think we've seen it twice in his career, and it's been an every other year thing. I don't think there's anything to that, but 63 catches as a rookie when he had a quarterback that they let throw the ball a little bit. 63 catches in year 3 when Phillip Rivers was there, dumping the ball off to him. You caught up, we're even now on Nyheim Hines. I think he absolutely, they've talked all summer long about how they want him to be more involved. They don't really have a second wide receiver behind Michael Pittman. I expect him to be second on the team in catches, 60 catch upside. He's going to run the ball sometime between 60 and 80 times as well. He can absolutely be a high-end flex or low-end number 2 for you in a full PPR league.
I wouldn't be surprised if he's in the 70s and maybe even more than that, just based on how much they love him. Dave, what's your concern?
Well, we've been down this road with Nyheim Hines, honestly, each of the last 2 years. He gets off to a big game early in the year. Everyone goes running to pick up Nyheim Hines off the waiver wire, and then he's a dud for a while. And even 2 seasons ago, he was 29th in PPR points per game among running backs. So I would tell you that I don't want to draft him too close to his ceiling. But to be fair, you guys aren't even necessarily doing that. I saw where you had him ranked. He's 34th among running backs. I think that's fair. I just think that there are other running backs that I'd rather have that have more upside. I'm concerned that Nyheim Hines, A, is going to be blocked by Jonathan Taylor. That's obvious. But B, even if Taylor wins a vacation to Hawaii and is gone for a couple of weeks, because I can't talk about injuries apparently on the show anymore, I have to say it like that, then Nyheim Hines wouldn't be the only running back in Indianapolis, and he wouldn't be somebody who would be a savior for a few weeks. I think his role is his role. I think 50 catches is more in line with what we should expect from him over the course of the year.
Yeah, and that one thing about the preseason usage, the way they used him makes me think that if Jonathan Taylor goes down, there will be somebody else sharing.
Yes.
But I think he might be a 15, 18 touch guy if there's no Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, I mean, that's what they told us. That's what they told us in that game against Buffalo, that he was their guy. And You never want to buy into when coaches start to, go outside their realm a little bit. But Frank Reich saying, if I played fantasy, I would draft Nyheim Hines. I think that tells you they're going to use Nyheim Hines quite a bit. And so I'm excited about his outlook for this season. And so I do think that he has maybe a career season in front of him. All right, let's talk about Jamaal Williams here. So you're going to hear me say this a lot with some of these guys that are stuck behind someone without necessarily a true defined role. Now, Williams will play a little bit more than some of these other handcuffs, but clearly DeAndre Swift is going to be the lead guy. Can you trust Jamaal Williams if DeAndre Swift is healthy?
Well, you can't trust him as a high-end flex like a Kareem Hunt or even like a Nyheim Hines. But like we had our 14-team league last night, and if I had 2 running backs and a flex in a 14-team league, I do think that he's going to be in that 10 to 12 touch range. If he gets a touchdown, then he's going to be good that week. What he does in the passing game will be interesting because he had a pretty big role there early in the year and caught some passes late in the year. In the middle of the year, they did nothing with him at all. But I do expect this is going to still be a 60-40 split between Swift and Williams, and it is still a very good offensive line. So Williams could have more success than he's being drafted. He's almost free. You find him in round 13 or 14 sometimes.
And the thing that we saw last year, DeAndre Swift had the shoulder injury. He missed time. He is, I don't want to say injury prone, but he does have the unfortunate situation of missing some games each of his first 2 seasons. So don't forget about Jamaal Williams when it comes to your draft with one of those late round picks. Let's combine the 2 wide receivers here. Nico Collins in his second year, Garrett Wilson in his rookie season. And so Collins, we see the path to targets. Brandon Cooks and probably Nico Collins. Could be Brevin Jordan, could be Rex Burkhead, could be hopefully Dameon Pierce, but Collins has shown very good promise this preseason. Garrett Wilson, however, is stuck with who knows who at quarterback for how long, because Joe Flacco probably going to start week 1, Zach Wilson dealing with that knee injury, but we did not see Zach Wilson necessarily maximize his targets. It was a lot of the other guys helping Elijah Moore. Moore is there, Corey Davis is there. Which of these 2 guys do you like better, and which one do you think has the chance to maybe become a starter for fantasy manager?
I like Nico Collins more right now because I think he has a chance to be a flex early in the year, even with Brandon Cooks. He's more of a play on opportunity than talent, whereas Wilson's more of a play on talent and hope everything works out. I don't think there's anybody that's going to challenge Cooks and Collins. There's been a lot of good reports about Collins in the camp that he's had, and I expect this Texans team to throw the ball a lot more than they did last year. They were bottom 5 in the league in plays. There'll be some regression there. As for Wilson, I think right at the beginning of the year, he's probably stuck behind Elijah Moore and Corey Davis, and I'm not even sure he's a full-time player, but his talent's too good. There's a reason he's a top 10 pick, and both Davis and Elijah Moore have enough injury history of their own.
Dave, we get to points in drafts where you take receivers like this, and then the start of the season happens, especially with younger guys, and in the case of both these, are probably on bad teams. And then a running back emerges, a tight end emerges because you didn't get the right one, a quarterback, same situation. How long do you give these guys on your roster before you say, okay, just enough is enough and I can't hold them because there are other players that I need to pick up off waivers?
And this is the problem when you draft these guys. You're not thinking about it necessarily. You're thinking, oh, I just hope that they're good all year, and then you're cutting them after week 3. And that would be about the time that I would say, all right, move on. If Nico Collins isn't doing anything by the 3rd week of the season, if there's somebody else that's on the waiver wire that I think can help me more, of course I'm going to make that move. And I would do the same with Garrett Wilson in that 3rd week. But I feel like I would regret it with Wilson more than I would with Collins. As long as Cooks is healthy, I feel like there's kind of a cap on what Nico Collins can do. I'll still take him over Garrett Wilson. There's something about Wilson that I love. He gets open like crazy. He's got a great catch radius. He's a leaper. He's really a true talent receiver. I loved him in the draft. But there's nothing he can do when that pass is a foot in front of him or 2 yards over his head coming from Zach Wilson. And there's also nothing you can do because he's sharing targets with Elijah Moore and Corey Davis. So I feel like if you drop them, you won't miss them, but you might want to come back to them if you happen to have an open roster spot before they break out. And I'm thinking about it more for Wilson than I am for Nico Collins.
Last sleeper we're looking at here is the one you have at tight end. That's Tyler Higbee. And it just feels like he's been criminally overlooked this offseason because we're waiting for Odell Beckham news. He may not join the team if he comes back to the Rams by the middle of the year. Van Jefferson, we don't know what his status is going to be early in the year. We saw Lance McCutcheons, for example, have a good preseason performance, but are they going to trust him because there was no Cooper Kupp or Allen Robinson? Could he be the 3rd pass catcher? And we know once upon a time he was a big playmaker for the Rams. It was a small stretch, small sample size, but he certainly proved it to Sean McVay.
Yeah, he's had a couple of really hot finishes to the season, but the thing I think that gets missed is that he kind of had an opportunity breakout last year. It's just for some reason his efficiency went in the tank. He was on pace for 96 targets last year. The problem was he'd gone from an 8.5 yards per target average with Jared Goff, a 75% catch rate, to only catching 72% of his passes and averaging 2 fewer yards per target. That makes no sense going from Jared Goff to Matthew Stafford. I expect we'll see Higbee in that 9 90 to 100 target range again. Only this time we'll see him at the 8 yards per target, which is going to put him in the 700 yards, which is a top 12 tight end.
It's great or late, and I think you see the list here. This is our consensus rankings. Heath, you're I think a little bit higher on Higbee than myself and Dave.